intro music. Yeah! Woohoo!
The players win. DTI has been freed. I mean, for the most part. And today we're going to talk about all the things that have been adjusted, as well as tomorrow's video you're going to want to check out. It is another Q&A video. Shout out to the good game design team who sat and did one with the player base. But let's talk about today's content, which is about the DTI building and the DTI faction that many of you have had a lot of issues with because, well, so many things got gated. And we talked about and argued that 4 months, it's an established mechanic at this point. And I do have to give a shout out to Ultimate DJ as well, who really persisted on continuing the fight. So shout out to DJ for that. Obviously, we made a video here. Not saying I gave up on it, but I'll admit it was really hard to imagine seeing them back off and go back to how things were. So with today's announcement, what we're seeing is the officers down here no longer are going to have a cooldown. So you'll be able to refresh and find. And just like that, with a simple reboot, you can see the update is taking effect, where now I can go ahead and pull these officers as much as I can afford to pull these officers. In fact, because I have more of the charge credit, let me use this one as an example and just pull through. So that's Masriad Vael. And you see, I got my guarantee shards, and now I can once again return right back to getting all that I would want to do, all that I can afford to do here in the game. Now, I want to be clear that there are still some things that have not been recovered, and I don't think we're going to see some things change. For a reminder, I'm going to put on the screen what the first free DTI movement led to, and then what the continual movement led to is where we're at today. So what we ended up getting was the Crenum Time weapon, the Chrono Deflector, able to pull, but limiting the amount of the temporal artifacts that you could get. Now, what has happened since then? Now, we're still going to wait on the further details of this, but the automatic temporal artifact shard conversion has also been temporarily disabled while they look at finding a better solution, because many players have talked about that ruined and took away a 10K free-to-play task in Alliance tournaments, as well as just other general spec and knowledge that people use those things for. And players were upset. And this has come with a lot of positive, and I think people should take it as a positive that Scopely listen. It's another example that I like to push to every year, that when the community speaks out as a whole, good things can happen. Now, have you gotten literally everything back from this? No, technically not. But you've gotten back 90% of it. And for me as a player, I'm very excited. Now, I hope I'm not so excited and so positive that people get dismissive of this video, but I still think it's very important for players to know the value and the strength of their voice, because a unifying voice results in things like this. Being able to now pull your officers as much as you want them, as much as you need them. When we talk about officers that have value, beer is one that comes up quite a bit. Why? Because of the below deck ability for more loot gain. You see a lot of people running this in mirror space and running this in the new augment space because they want to get more rep and more currencies. Understandable. Well, now you can actually go after that. And that way, if you're doing your pulls and you're doing your grind here in DTI, it feels like the only bottleneck left is what the bottleneck was and should have stayed, which is the currencies themselves and then the rep to actually progress. Everything else is now only going to be limited by what you're pulling, with the exception of the higher end of the artifacts. So you're not going to be able to go too deep into the artifacts there. However, you're still gonna be able to unlock them and get the first early tiers without a limit, as they talked about in the announcement several days ago, which is the first time they started walking back the DTI stuff. And again, this is coming on the back of a really rough week here in STFC, and maybe that, you know, was part of why they decided to do it. I can't really answer to that, and to be honest, I didn't ask. What's important for me is that the player's voice was heard and the DTI was rolled back to getting some of the most important features in a position for players to take advantage of. Players were able to take advantage of for 4 months, and now you will be able to do that as well, again, for the most part. There are still some things I don't want to, act like were completely removed, and again, that's why I have them on the screen, so you can see them yourself. But the big key is, you got what you were wanting. All the memes, all the shut down and banned accounts and temporarily silenced accounts because people were screaming the same thing over and over and spamming hashtags. The main point of this video is to say, number one, you got it. Good job, everybody. And if you're a newer player, lower level player, saying, hey, I don't even have this affecting me yet, be thankful and know one lesson from this video. This video might even get a ton of views, but hopefully it gets a ton of excitement because it proves once again that the player voice works. The key is unifying. Having everybody on the same page. This is something where everybody lined up on, and they ended up walking it back. So the Janeway's Pocket Watch, you're gonna be able to get Now you're not going to have to worry about once you get to Temporal Director, which as you can see, I'm only 5,400 rep away. But once I get there, I'll be able to pull that up until about tier 8, and then I'll finally get slowed down. But until then, I will have unlimited pulls. With my officers, Toll Rob being one of the more valuable officers in the game today, with that Armada and Entity boosting shot ability that so many people really enjoy, not to mention the loot ability of the captains right there. That's going to be something that I can then pull until I am, well, out of the currency that you see above, the static DTI credits. So again, this is a credit to Scopely for listening, because it's very easy for them to have been stubborn and just said, hey, we think this imbalances the game and we're going to stick with it. They didn't, they relented, and I believe praise should be given for listening to their player base, which is something that we have seen them do better at in recent years. And I know if you're a newer player, understandable if you're frustrated. I come from the dark days of 7 years ago where almost nothing was listened to and it was simply said, that's how it is. There was even times where if there was a player beneficial bug and players found out about it, then they were threatened to have their account shut down. Those days are long gone at STFC, thank goodness. What we have today, at least today, is a day of celebration. We can talk about these things being returned to you as the player. Sorry for the long monologue, and you've seen the news here. It's basically a short post about the temporal artifacts and the DTI finding a good bit of its freedom returned, and I personally am really happy about that. I am also really excited about tomorrow's content, about the Q&A, giving my thoughts as well as my conversations personally with the dev team. Hopefully you look forward to that. I know I am. Live long and plunder. Stay safe with their Space Cowboys. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next Star Trek Fleet Command video. As always, greatly appreciate you. I'm out.
An even better outro than the intro. For the Empire and glory to your house.